Do you want to know what it really feels like when your life falls apart? And then, somehow, against all logic, millions of people start listening to your voice. Let me tell you. I'm Elvira Bary, a writer born in the USSR, and I've just done something I once thought was impossible. I've become one of the most watched Russian-born writers in the West. And it all happened in 1 year. Yes, I still have trouble believing it myself. So, November 2024. Same room behind me. Same poodle Boba loyally snoring by my side and secretly licking his paws, which is strictly forbidden. Same computer. Different microphone, because a year ago I didn't even know what audio quality meant. Back then, I had maybe 50 subscribers. My channel was about, brace yourself, psychological self-help. I had no idea what I was doing, where I was going, or why my life choices had led me to sit in front of the camera giving motivational advice to 10 people, 2 of whom were my husband and my mother-in-law. To understand how I ended up here, we need to rewind to February 2022, the week before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. At that point, I was living a strange kind of double life. For 20 years, I'd been in California, thinking my life was about 70% successful, which, let's be honest, is already not bad. I wrote historical novels published by one of Moscow's biggest houses. I'd even sold film rights. I ran the largest creative writing school in the Russian-speaking internet. Over 50,000 readers devoured my articles and lectures every month. Things looked fine, except for one small problem. I was not published in America. It bothered me, of course, but what could I do? Back in the days, a professional translation of a historical novel cost $6,000 to $10,000 if you hire a real expert, someone who actually knows what they are doing. I couldn't translate my books on my own. Literary English was simply out of my reach. So I saved up and translated all my novels from the Russian Treasure series. But that didn't solve the deeper problem. I had zero audience in English. 0 subscribers, 0 readers, and in America, if you don't have a platform, publishers don't care. They don't care if you've published 17 novels in Moscow or that your students adore you. To American publishers, I was nobody. Not even a local correspondent for the Daily Turnip. So I kept talking to my Russian-speaking audience, the readers of my books and the students who came to my lectures. It really was a double life. For my American neighbors and the PTA parents at my son's school, I was just a housewife. For my Russian readers, students and followers, I was a respected author, even a bit of a guru. I never even mentioned my writing to my English-speaking acquaintances because that question always followed. Why don't you publish your books here in America? Well, because I'd already collected over 100 rejection letters. That's why. All very polite, all assuring me that I was talented, but sadly, there was no market for this kind of work in the United States. So on every official form in America, whenever I had to state my occupation, I simply wrote housewife. By 2021, things were getting busy. New digital platforms were opening up across the Russian-speaking internet, places where writers could self-publish and even make good money. Some of my students were already earning $10,000 a month. For that part of the world, it was a fortune. Their hottest genres: fantasy, elves, curses, and strong women with swords. So my students begged me to teach them how to write badass girls, romantic elves, and ruthless magical overlords. That's when I came up with the Sphinx method, a system for defining a character's personality type and predicting how they'd act in any situation. My students began topping the charts. And naturally I thought, hold my beer, I can do this too. So I wrote The Girl from the Labyrinth, a fantasy that was funny, heartfelt, and, if I may say, pretty brilliant. It shot straight to the top of the charts on LitNet. And for a moment, everything looked perfect. And then the war began. I've spoken many times about what it feels like to watch your own country commit atrocities. But nothing prepares you for the moment when you take a stand and the world you build turns against you. I sent an anti-war letter to my subscribers. Within days, my inbox turned into a horror movie. Hundreds of angry messages from people I once taught, students who had learned from me, written to me, traveled with me to Florence, Berlin, and Montenegro. Now they called me a traitor, and I just sat there, staring at the screen, watching new curses drop into my inbox, wondering how the same people who once called me their mentor could now wish me dead. Then came the email from my publisher. Polite, formal, cold. They said they could no longer work with me. Nothing personal, of course. It was just too dangerous to publish authors like me. And just like that, everything I'd built collapsed. I was no longer a writer because I had no publisher. No longer a teacher because I didn't want to teach people who might use my words to serve propaganda. Even consulting for those few in Russia who still shared my values became impossible. Sanctions froze all payments. My Girl from the Labyrinth project was suspended too. The platform I published was Ukrainian. Meanwhile, I was listening to the news every day about Russian bombs falling on Ukrainian cities. And I felt ashamed. Ashamed to be Russian. It seemed like the whole world now hated us, that people would treat Russians the way they once treated Germans or Japanese during World War II. And then, a few months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I suspect it developed from the monstrous stress of that year. Surgery, radiation therapy, and the long process of trying to piece myself back together followed. At some point, I began to paint, and before long my house was full of strange paintings, windows into parallel worlds. I also wanted to fix something, anything, in this collapsing reality. That's when I fell in love with restoring vintage furniture. It gave me real joy to find some battered old monster of a dresser, scratched, bitten, maybe even chewed by dogs, and bring it back to life. And I was good at it. People actually bought my rescued chests and tables for decent money. Sometimes I'd even catch myself thinking, maybe it's time to quit writing. You've already written your best works. Russian Treasures was your masterpiece. Someday it will be reprinted in Russia. Eventually they'll probably make a TV series out of it. It's perfect material for the screen. Epic, passionate, tragic, and funny all at once. But you'll likely never live to see it. And that's okay, it happens. After all, Moby Dick was written by Herman Melville in 1851 and forgotten for 70 years. Mikhail Bulgakov died in 1940 and never saw The Master and Margarita published. It came out a quarter of a century later, in 1966. My Sphinx method really helped me. I decided to imagine my life as a novel, and myself as a heroine who had lost everything, identity, community, and business, and now had to rebuild. And I asked, what would someone like her do next? By the way, if you are curious about your personality type, you can find all the materials on my website, elvirabary.com. According to my own system, My personality archetype is keeper, ruler. We are the world builders. They are philosophers, writers, teachers, and ideologists. Our gift is our voice. We can explain, inspire, and ignite hearts. It's something that happens naturally. We are also stubborn and tireless. And those were the only two things I had left. I knew I had to start from scratch. New platforms, new audience, new language. And then ChatGPT appeared. And my friends, that changed everything. Suddenly, I could write in Russian and translate it all into English, not for thousands of dollars, but for $20 a month or whatever the subscription costs. Just like that, I had a voice in English. So I started a new YouTube channel. I began small, posting short videos, reflections, bits of psychology, fragments of the Sphinx method. I diligently took courses on how to be a proper YouTuber and learned the ropes. But there was one big problem. Every YouTube guru insisted your channel had to be about what you care about most. And at that time, I didn't even think about Russian history or politics. I was sure no one would listen anyway. Progress was painfully slow. I could perform naturally in Russian, but in English? Oh, that was torture. 5 or 6 takes per sentence. 10-minute videos that left me as exhausted as if I'd spent the day in a coal mine. And nobody watched them. 10, maybe 15 people. Then, in December 2024, a miracle. The YouTube algorithm suddenly picked up one of my videos. In a single day, I gained 100 new subscribers. 100! It felt like Hollywood success. And what was that video about? Russian vodka. Of course. It was just one of those random, completely unrelated videos. I don't even remember why I decided to record it in the first place. I was disoriented, wandering around the house asking Boba the poodle, what do we do now? For 20 years, I'd lived absolutely certain that no one cared about Russia. I had proof. I checked the news sites regularly and saw that Russia appeared there only when something catastrophic happened. The world no longer saw it as a threat. It had simply looked away. Russians were left to live inside their own bubble. Within that world, political debates raged. Alexei Navalny released his brilliantly funny and infuriating investigations into corruption. Putin annexed Crimea and part of Donbass. And still, hardly anyone outside paid attention. It took the full-scale invasion of Ukraine for the world to finally look up. Inspired by my unexpected success of the vodka video, I began filming short stories about my Soviet childhood. Funny, shocking, and sometimes heartwarming memories. And then, through the comments, I began to understand what people really wanted to know. They asked, why does Putin act the way he does? What drives his inner circle? What kind of society creates such contradictions, geniuses and monsters, saints and tyrants? And that, finally, was my field, my passion, my expertise. I hoped that by April 2025, I'd have 1,000 subscribers. By April, I had 30,000. The people who joined were extraordinary. Diplomats, professors, entrepreneurs, military officers. Smart, curious, educated minds who genuinely wanted to understand the largest, strangest country on earth. Decision makers, thinkers, and seekers. The kind of audience I never dreamed of having. By the end of summer 2025, my teaching career was back, but in a completely new form. Now I was teaching not literary craft, but history, political science, philosophy, and anthropology all at once to an audience far larger than anything I'd ever had before the war. In just 1 month, my videos passed 1 million views. 1 million! It's hard to even imagine numbers like that. When I went to the hospital for my regular cancer prevention treatments, nurses always tried to make small talk and ask, "So, what do you do?" And now I could proudly say I am a YouTuber. But something important was still missing from my life. I still had one small Telegram channel in Russian, a few hundred of my former students hanging around. For months, I'd been whining there that I desperately wanted to return to fiction. But I didn't know how. What's the point of writing a new novel when you don't have a publisher in America? Just to toss it on Amazon like my previous works? And then, one night in early October, something strange happened. I woke up in the middle of the night and knew I had to write a novel about the war in Ukraine. Something raw, powerful, and painfully truthful. The kind of book that would earn me 20 years in prison in Russia for discrediting the glorious occupying army and the crooks who commanded. The plot of the Snow Queen's Spring came to me almost instantly. It would be the story of Marika Snegova, the president of a large Moscow company that helps Russia bypass sanctions for parallel imports. But Marika has a secret. Her daughter Alisa studied at Harvard, met a Ukrainian man, married him. And when the war began, the couple dropped everything and went to Kiev to save the wounded. If Marika's patrons in the government, competitors, or the security services ever found out, her life would be in danger. In Russia, people in her position have a way of accidentally falling out of windows. Then Alisa stops answering her messages, and Marika has no idea what happened to her child. The only person who can help her is Leo, an American engineer she once loved, back in 1985. He is in Kiev and agrees to search for Alisa, but only on one condition. Marika must find a Ukrainian boy who was taken to Russia by the occupiers. That's the story I'm writing now. Dozens of people are helping me tell it. I correspond with a Ukrainian woman fighting near Kharkov who describes how they evacuate the wounded from the battlefield. Friends in Kiev tell me what it's like to live under bombings or to face winter without heat or electricity. Acquaintances in Moscow explain the black market routes that bring sanctioned goods into Russia despite all the bans. A wonderful American lady told me about her trip to the USSR in the mid-1980s, giving me an entirely new perspective, not from inside Russia, but from the outside, through American eyes. And one story especially touched me, from a man whose ancestors fled Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution. He told me how, in his aristocratic family, the elder brother was loved, and the younger one wasn't, because tradition said that the firstborn should inherit everything. And I thought, this is Russia and Ukraine. Two siblings, one always dominating, insisting, the other resisting and fighting to keep his own identity. Now I'm writing chapter 5. The work is moving quickly, interrupted only by the need to film new videos for you. I have no idea what will happen to my new novel, and honestly, I don't care to think about it right now. It feels as if something is simply guiding me through this, whispering, "Do what you must, and come what may. Tell the world that Russia has many faces and that Putin has no right to privatize its image, to make it seem like this country can bring only fear and disgust. Tell the stories of Ukrainians. What I've discovered is that for them, being heard truly matters. So many people tell them, I don't want to talk about it. It upsets me. And when that happens, victims are left alone with their pain and grief, crushed not only by despair, but by the realization that nobody cares, that they personally are small, insignificant, disposable. It's an unbearable feeling. Of course, I hope for the best, that the Snow Queen Spring will find a publisher in America and be well received. But it's not about vanity. My life wouldn't change much either way. I'll still spend my days in front of the computer, occasionally getting up to walk my dog or head to the garage to rescue another veteran chair from a bygone era. What I do want is to help repair some of the damage in this world. There are thousands of people in Ukraine who have lost their limbs or their faces. If a piece of shrapnel hits your face and tears away your nose or part of your cheek, your life changes forever, and for the much, much worse. That must be fixed as much as it possibly can be. I hope my book will raise awareness of this. One of my main characters, Leo, tries to persuade a young Ukrainian soldier, a man who lost his face and leg in battle, to keep living, to keep hoping. It's not about money. The young man refuses reconstructive surgery because, as he says, what's the point? I don't make any grand plans or promises. I don't even know the best way to approach this issue. My task is simply to create an anchor point, something around which real action could begin. I believe the right people will come. The doctors, the organizers, the donors, the people who feel in their bones that you don't just watch history, you answer to it. And now I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Have you ever told the truth and paid for it? Lost friends? Lost work? Lost family? Or did you stay quiet to protect yourself? I'm not judgy. I'm done both. I've spoken and I've paid for it. And I've also stayed silent when I was tired and scared. Tell me your moment. I want to read it. Other people here will read it. You might help someone feel less alone. Thank you for being part of this journey. For every like, every comment, every question that made me think deeper. If you'd like to follow the journey of my new novel, The Snow Queen Spring, you'll find a link in the description to join my newsletter. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, if they made you think or helped you see Russia from a different angle, I'd be deeply grateful if you'd help me keep this channel alive. You can join the think tank, buy me a coffee, support via PayPal, or press super thanks under the video. Thank you for being here, for thinking, for feeling, for staying curious. And thank you for proving that even out of loss, you can build a community. And maybe even a little miracle.